दो आज इंग्लिश में कर देते हैं. So we'll do speak in English today because yesterday I mostly spoke in Hindi, as you know. I was reflecting on what could I speak on. When I look at you, I find plenty of material. I'm just joking, you're adorable. You mean so much to me. Your presence, your being here, and you're coming all the way, all the sacrifices you make in your life to be here, all the challenges you face, sometimes some of you to even come here, and to keep me a part of your lives, that means a lot to me. And it's never lost on me, even for a moment, that how much you mean to me. You are the sole reason that I choose to show up here the way I do, even if sometimes I don't want to. So I was thinking about what to talk about, and I got reminded of a book I read many years ago. Probably around 2016 or 15, I read that book. You might have heard of it. It's called Brothers Karamazov by Fyodor Dostoevsky. And I read it on Kindle, but it's a pretty thick book. It's like 800 plus pages. In that book, it's a philosophical fiction, and there's a deep exploration of faith and doubt and so on. There's a character somewhere in the book. He's not even the main character, he's introduced as a side character. And Dostoevsky calls him the mysterious visitor. So he visits a person whose name is Zosima. And Zosima is a monk. He's a Christian monk, an elderly monk. And this visitor is a well-respected man. He's a great philanthropist. Everybody loves him in the town. Whenever anybody needs any help, he's always there, helping people with the resources he has, whether they be financial, emotional, moral, physical, any which way you see it. And they both sort of develop a rapport, and they kind of grow fond of each other. And after many visits, one day this visitor tells him, the monk Zosima, that look, I actually have something to confess. And he says, what is it? I mean, everything is going so amazing in your life. You are the best known man in the town. People love you. What possibly do you have to confess? He said, look, I've never told this to anybody. But I think to you, I can tell. I feel safe. You know, sometimes when we ask people, oh, why didn't you tell me this, or why didn't you tell me that, or if you really loved me or believed me, you would have told me. But sometimes we don't feel safe in telling what we may have done and things like that. So this person, the mysterious visitor, and I think Dostoevsky does something really amazing here. He does not name this character till the very end. Because the moment you name somebody, that person is now a character in any story, in a real life story or a piece of fiction. But if you don't name them, then they are a mirror. You may see glimpses of yourself in that character, in that role. So he does not name this till the very end. So this visitor says to Zosima that, look, the truth is, I have committed a crime so grave that I'm ashamed to even mention. What did you do? Zosima said. Even being a monk, I am vested with the power of the religion or that framework to actually ask you that question, he said. Well, I deeply loved somebody, he said. 14 years ago, there was a girl, I really loved her, but she ditched me for somebody else. And she married this other man. And I could not come to terms with it. I could not accept it. So I actually killed her. I murdered her. But it so turned out that there was another person in the prison who was falsely implicated in this crime. And he was the one who actually went to prison for that. And before the police could unearth who actually did the crime, that person died. That prisoner passed away. So they said the case is closed. He was the murderer and he's dead now. And that's that. Why are you telling me now? Zosima says. And he said, look, the thing is that for 14 years, and this was 14 years ago, he said, I've lived in abject misery. I've lived with this burden on my consciousness and on my conscience, and I just don't know what to do about it. Everything felt suffocating. Anytime anybody even said a few words of admiration, they felt like blades cutting through my skin. And Kierkegaard, this great philosopher, said something very beautiful. He said, freedom and guilt are inseparable. Guilt is somewhere an acknowledgement of the dignity of your existence as a human being, that you are free to choose, because if you were not free to choose, you would not be guilty. What makes you guilty is the fact, or what makes you feel guilty is the fact that you are a creature with moral agency who at some point in time chose to misuse it. If we did not have the freedom, we would not be guilty. But guilt comes in various shades. There is toxic guilt and there is healthy guilt. Positive guilt or good guilt can be a good moral compass. That, I did something I shouldn't have. And next time, I'll be watchful, I'll be mindful. But toxic guilt is sort of turns into what we call shame. That I am bad. Guilt is, I did something bad. And toxic guilt is, or shame is, I am bad. And the moment we start to believe in that story, the moment we start to shame ourselves, then that becomes our personality, that becomes our definition. We say, I am bad, and that's that. But it's important to go to the root of why you're feeling that way, what brought on about that. I mean, there is a thing called intergenerational guilt. People pass on their guilt to their children, to their grandchildren, to the other generations. Religions, many of them have passed on guilt to just whole millions and millions of their followers. The whole basis of Christianity, even for that matter, is based on the fact that an original sin was committed and you are guilty for Jesus Christ's passion or his crucifixion. So it's built on that guilt. The entire foundation is that. The same happens in families too. Parents pass on their guilt, and children are eternally in guilt. And when you don't know how to resolve that guilt, it turns into shame. The focus shifts from doing something wrong to saying, I am wrong. A few days ago, I spoke about this philosopher called Martin Buber, right, who wrote I and Thou. And in that, he talks about existential guilt and neurotic guilt. Existential guilt is very real, he says. It stems from actually doing something wrong. Betraying somebody's trust. To say, look, I betrayed somebody's trust, I did wrong, I deceived somebody, or I duped somebody, and so on. He said, and those religious people, monks and so on, who answer that guilt on your behalf, then you go to a confession and you say, oh, I did this wrong. And they say, oh, don't worry. You just do this little thing, this little chant, or this little act, and you'll be resolved of your guilt. He said they are doing that person a great disservice, because this kind of guilt needs to be acknowledged, answered, and acted upon, and not simply cured. Because it's based on an action that we genuinely believed we did wrong. And sometimes when people have done something wrong and they come to me and they say, I'm sorry, actually that means nothing. That means very little. You need to say sorry to the person you wronged. You need to resolve this guilt, this action with that person. But there is another thing called the neurotic guilt, which is you feel guilty just for existing. You say, I'm bad, I'm wrong, I shouldn't be happy. You feel guilty for being happy even. Because you may have seen your parents eternally complaining and sad. And you think, no, happiness is not the way. It cannot be this way. I shouldn't be so happy. I shouldn't be so upbeat, because that's not how I saw my parents, who are always a child's role model until they discover otherwise. So in this case, this mysterious visitor, whose name is Mikhail, which is revealed in the end, says to Zosima, look, I committed this grave crime. And I've had this, what we call, moral injury. And this injury hasn't healed. I've done so many things, so many great things since then. I've married since then. I've got a family. I've got amazing children. I've got everything going for me. But I'm not happy. Every day it haunts me. And that's really what guilt does. What should I do? He says to Zosima, the monk. Zosima says, I think you should come clean. Although in the book, it's Mikhail who says first, do you think I should confess, I should tell the world, this is what I did? It would take great courage, Zosima said. But I think it would be the right thing to do. You should tell the world. And this man feels greatly relieved. He thinks, yes, I should have done this long time ago. Sometimes I think, when we pray, we always pray for self-purification, as I've always held. And when we pray, we always pray to Lord Ganpati first. Why? Because let's first address the elephant in the room. I always think so. Until we have the courage to first address what we did, there is no reckoning. There is no resolution. There is no redemption. There is no deliverance. There is none of these. It's just chaos and more chaos and more chaos. In fact, some 20 years ago, they did this amazing experiment where they called in some participants in a controlled group, and they said, all we want you to do is recall something unethical you might have done at some point in time in your life. Some people chose to recall, some didn't and couldn't recall. Now, interestingly, those who recalled, now, to all those participants, it was never told what was the objective of the experiment. They were told that just to see your memory recall, or that we recall bad things more than we recall good things. because guilt, believe it or not, is unfinished business of the consciousness. And mind has a tendency to cling to unfinished business a lot more. It's like a waiter a good waiter could take 20 different orders from the same table and go in the kitchen and tell it perfectly. But the moment that is done, the order is served, they remember absolutely nothing of that order. But until the last dish has been served, they remember everything. So until that is resolved, until that business is finished, guilt is going to weigh on you. It's that neurotic guilt which refuses to leave you. So they did this experiment whereby they asked these people to recall something unethical. And afterwards, as a parting gift, they said, there's a little table, you can pick whatever you like. There was some stationery, pens and pencils and notepads, or there were these antiseptic wipes to wipe your hand and so on. Now, with the ratio of 2:1, those who recalled an unethical occurrence, incident, or episode from their lives picked up the wipes and not the stationery. But those who didn't actually chose stationery over the wet wipes. Because somewhere deep within the thought, what we did was unhygienic to the soul, to the consciousness. It was against our moral framework. And therefore, somehow we need to clean or cleanse ourselves of it. And Freud would completely agree, because he said something deeply beautiful and insightful. He said something along the lines that guilt is nothing but the tension between your ego, which is who you are, and superego, which is who you believe you should be. So we have two versions of ourselves, who we are, and we act based on who we are. And who we want to be, or who we believe we should be, and we want to act based on who we believe we should be. So until you resolve that tension, it never really goes away. Mikhail, in this case, is feeling greatly relieved. He says to Zosima that, today I can breathe in peace. You're absolutely right. Thank you for guiding me. And I'm going to do exactly that. I am going to confess to the world what's a grave crime I committed. And then the next day, he comes back. And he has it all written down. His entire confession, the series of events, and so on. But he's mad at the monk. He's absolutely livid. He's simmering he's bubbling with rage. And he says, I absolutely hate you. You got me to this point where now I'll have to expose myself to the world. And this is what happens. They say sometimes guilt becomes a very convenient blanket for somebody to hide themselves behind a veil of innocence. So sometimes guilt is not guilt. It's not even shame. It's simply a very clever escape route. Oh, I'm guilty of this, I'm like this, I'm so sorry. But you're not actually sorry in that moment. You have discovered that this is my way of retaining my innocence. This man goes to a priest and says, forgive me, Father, for I have sinned. What have you done, my child? Well, during the World War II, I when the Jews were being killed, I allowed a Jewish family to hide in my attic. Oh, that's not exactly a sin. I think that's a noble act, the priest says. Yes, Father, but I charged them rent. Okay, that's not exactly ideal, but still, it's not a sin. Yes, Father, but do you think I should tell them that the war has ended 5 years ago? They're still living in my attic. I'm still collecting rent. And that's what, in a way, guilt does. Guilt allows you to hide, you see. And it's important to differentiate between guilt. Is it existential, which means it's actually based on something you did? Is it shame, that now it has crossed over and it is now shame and you're thinking, oh, it's not what I did, but it's who I am? Or is it simply a regret? I wish I had done something else. I wish I'd done differently. Regrets are absolutely meaningless for the most part. Because in regret, you have the benefit of the hindsight. You say, oh, I should have done this, I could have done this, but you acted in whatever way you did based on the information you had at the time. As I say, it seemed like a good idea back then. But if your guilt is a cover, which you have chosen to now remain a certain way so you never actually have to answer yourself. Because in reality, guilt is betrayal of the self by yourself. If you don't let it resolve, it's going to turn you into something you were never meant to be. It's going to make you into something you never were to begin with. So he is now absolutely mad. And he's saying, you should have guided me otherwise. Why would you do this? And now Mikhail is thinking, I should kill this monk. Why? Because now he knows. He knows my truth. He knows what I did. I was hiding behind something just fine for 14 long years, and now he knows who I actually am and what I really did, and therefore I cannot hide behind it anymore. This man goes to his guru, says, look, I feel very guilty. For what? He says, I've been stealing from a workplace for about 20 years now. Whether it's a notepad, pen, pencil, some stationery, some biscuits, some coffee sachets or whatever, and you name it. He said, so what are you feeling? He said, I feel very guilty. Since when have you started feeling guilty? The guru asked. Ever since they started doing the inventory, he said. Earlier I was okay. But now that they know something is missing and I know I am the cause, I feel terrible, he said. I feel I have to do something about it. So I feel very guilty. And that actually raises a very important question. Are we guilty because we did something wrong? Is this guilt merely a cover? Or are we now guilty because somebody else knows our truth? I read this beautiful thing once. They said, don't tell me what they said about me. You tell me what made them comfortable to talk to you about me like that. And where does then guilt stand in the evolution of consciousness? Now he's mad and he's thinking, I should kill this monk. I should kill Zosima because he's the reason I'm feeling so terrible. Earlier, I was feeling only suffocated. Now I feel absolutely bonkers. And this man is the reason behind it. All he had to do was say, "You're forgiven and don't worry about it." But no, he said, "No, you should confess and tell the world." And then his anger turns into hate. So he came with a certain expectation, very loving. They develop sort of a kinship, friendship. They start talking. Then he becomes vulnerable. He exposes his vulnerability. And when he's given the right advice, which he was not prepared for at that time, first he feels relief, then he feels anger, and then he feels hate. He says, "Oh, this is not right. You blew my cover." But that's the thing. Once you have taken a certain step towards a higher level of consciousness, you cannot unsee yourself. You cannot go back to the previous old ways, no matter how deeply you want. And so, Mikhail chooses to write it all down, as he had done it anyway, and decides to gather everybody, a group of people in the public, and spell it all out. So he does exactly that. But nobody takes him seriously. It's as if he's gone mad or he's just making things up. There is no way this gentleman could do something like this. It's impossible. He's so kind, he's so sweet, he's so philanthropic, he's such a charitable individual, so compassionate, so loving, so empathetic always. There is no way that he could say such things. He could do such a thing. Nobody takes him seriously. Now he's even more distraught. Because to him it had meant everything. But to the world it meant nothing. Just a confession, if that. But then he dies a few days later with a certain peace in his heart, knowing that I acted out of jealousy, vengeance, and anger, and betrayal, or a sense of betrayal at least. And then I suffered from that moral injury for 14 years, even though my sense of guilt was no more than a false cover. But now he's peaceful. Because there is a resolution to it, there is a closure to it. But guilt doesn't have to be your Bolo Radha Krishna Bhagwan ki jai. But guilt doesn't have to be your identity. When we don't resolve it, that's precisely what it becomes in an individual. You must have seen those people, you must have met, or sometimes we are one of those who are constantly apologizing. They will apologize in advance. I'm sorry for sitting this way, I'm sorry for getting up this way, I'm sorry for eating this way, I'm sorry for dressing this way, blah, 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 blah. Deep somewhere, they have inherited what we call intergenerational guilt. They've let guilt become their identity. And to resolve it, to resolve that guilt is truly what would set you free. And that requires acknowledging what we did, or understanding why we are feeling this way, and then not letting guilt become shame or neurotic or toxic, and then resolving it. Imagine a courtroom for a moment And in that courtroom, there is a judge, there is a jury, there are some spectators who have vested interest, maybe there is some media, and you have the defense counsel, you have the prosecution, and then you have the culprit. Now imagine all of those is just one person. And that's your mind. When it comes to guilt, you are the judge, you are the jury, you are the one giving the verdict, and you are the one passing the sentence, and you are the one in the dock, and you are the one defending yourself, and you are the one holding yourself responsible, and you're the one watching yourself. All those things are happening to you at that point in time, which simply is nothing, not just simple rambling of the mind, but it's really unresolved guilt. So I'm guilty for speaking on guilt today. Hope it wasn't too heavy a